All right, good evening. Let me go ahead and get us started. If you're out in the lobby, feel free to grab some food or grab some coffee, water, and head in as you're able. We're going to get started here in just a moment. My name is Ben Dockery, and I get to serve as the Executive Director of the Lakelight Institute. Thanks for being here and being a part of this evening. If you are new or have never been a part of one of the programs or initiatives of Lakelight, first of all, thank you. Hope somebody invited you or maybe saw it online somewhere. This is one of the kind of things that we are able to do. Lakelight is a 501c3 started a couple years ago by Christ Church, just recognizing some of the needs and some of the changing realities of the world, and that we needed to create a format to more deliberately take on some of these more difficult things that are headed our way culturally, and to think about them more carefully, to train people both inside the church but also in the community, and to bring in some thought leaders, some authors, some experts in the field to help us think through issues that are coming our way. There is more information out there than you can possibly metabolize at any given point, and so how do you begin to prioritize those things and think through those? That's why Lakelight exists. We're a learning organization, and so we do programs or initiatives just like this. So a talk or a forum. We have classes that are a little bit more deliberate. We have a fellows program that's more extensive. In addition to that, we create resources, so online or in print, to try to help you think through what's going on. And then finally, we create experiences, so it could be an event or a study tour where we go to Oxford or Israel or Turkey this fall, to really give you an immersive learning experience. And all of it is aimed, you'll see inside of the Crest and other places, we're promoting timeless wisdom for modern life. That's what Lakelight exists to do, and would love to tell you more about that. Before we get started, a couple people to thank. So I'll just say this. When we first came up with this idea, we reached out to some of these panelists and just said, here's what we know we need to do. We need to think through issues of AI. Artificial intelligence is changing the world. Every newspaper, every article, every podcast, everybody's talking about it all the time. People are trying to figure out how to implement it personally. So let's see if we can get 30 people in a room upstairs. We'll have 3 or 4 panelists, and we'll start talking about it. And thanks to Jill Carter, who's in the room, she said, Ben, you are crazy. You're going to have more than 30 people show up for that, I promise you. And so online, I know that many of you have joined us online. We have over 100 people online and in the room as well. And so, Jill, thank you for not just letting 30 of us sit upstairs and saying, Ben, you need to think bigger, and inviting a lot more people. So I want to thank there. Also want to thank our staff. So Caitlin and Lexi and Glenn and our tech team have really kind of rallied to respond to that, to make sure we could pull off all this stuff and to stream it to those of you who are at home or watching this later on as well. I want to thank specifically some program sponsors. So we have a slide for this. Everything we do, because we're a nonprofit, gets support financially as well, and for events like this. I don't know if you can read that or not. So our Lakelight board really helps direct the work and to sponsor that. So I always want to thank our board members. I see at least 3 of you that are in here tonight, so thanks for being here. Stephanie Hayes has also been a sponsor of this event tonight. And then we had an anonymous gift that came in specifically to help us to work this out. And then the Center for Bioethics and Human Dignity, you'll learn a little bit more about that later tonight. Dr. Matthew Epinette, who leads that organization, is one of the panelists, and they're helping sponsor this as well. One of the things that they're going to do, I'll tell you a little bit about them, is Dr. Epinette just taught a 4-week class on ethics. He's an ethics professor, taught a class on ethics and AI. I actually went through the class myself, watched it online. It's a $100 class, $99 class. They're giving, if you would like to take it, you just go to their website. We'll send an email, don't worry. Type in Lakelight, and you get it for $25. So it's offering that to those who want to take a next step, specifically if that's your field. So I want to thank our sponsors for that. Also, in addition to that, I want to give you some free resources. So for being here tonight, for signing up for this, if you registered and your email is in that system, we'll send this out. We'll make sure that you know about the Lakelight Monthly and then Mike Woodruff's Friday Update. That is a news and analysis cultural way to think about the world from a biblical perspective that provides wisdom to your inbox every Friday. So I want to make sure that you know those are coming your way. And then lastly, when you came in, hopefully you got a card that has a picture of the crest in the front. It looks like this. For those of you who are online, you didn't get one of these. But there's a question on there. We would love to hear from you. What would you like us to go and research forums to create in the future? So what ideas or what topics or what trends are you seeing in the culture that are pressing on your life or your family or your business or your educational space that you would like to help us find some speakers for in the future. So you can write that down, leave it on that, and on your way out tonight, just leave that card there. The QR code on there is a chance if you would like to donate or support in any way. That's a direct link to our giving page, and you can scan that and donate, make a donation if you'd like to do that as well. I want to make you know about that. Lastly, if you want to find out more about Lakelight on your way out, we have an annual report that we try to make sure people get a chance to see that really gives a more larger overview of the work of the Institute. And so on your way out today, you can grab that at those tables. You didn't come here to hear me give that long introduction. You came here to learn more about artificial intelligence, and I know that, so I'm gonna start getting out of your way. What if I told you that that whole thing that I just read was generated by ChatGPT or Copilot?
I feel sad.
Would you care, right? Would you care, the information you just heard, what if I actually didn't write that? What if I gave a series of prompts that said, how should I introduce this event? Would that matter to you? What if it was an editorial in a newspaper? Would you care if it was a human or not? What about a birthday card from your spouse, the words? What if it was generated by Copilot instead? Would that matter to you? I don't know. These are the kind of questions that humans just haven't had to ask in the past, and the kind of questions, I mean, those are low-level like types of things, but that is, those are the kind of things that we're doing. Tonight, as we do this, this is not an IT conference. This is not a tech. We're not gonna, some people on this panel can do this. It's certainly something I cannot do, but this is supposed to be an introduction to a rudimentary, like, let's get some groundwork for what artificial intelligence is, and let's see some of the significant questions that are surfacing and ways that the world is changing, the ways that our lives are planning to change because of some of this tech development. And so that's where we're headed tonight. So we're going to start off, even before we jump with the panel, I've asked Mike Conley. Mike Conley is the Chief Revenue Officer at Blue Voyant. He has been in the tech space for 30 years and doing cybersecurity stuff. He has a military background as well. And one of the things that Mike does when he travels and speaks, he's done this at Northwestern, he's done it at Duke, he's done it at Notre Dame, is he just kind of gives people a, hey, here's an introduction to this topic. You don't have to be scared off by it. Let us talk about what is AI, what are some of these tech developments. So I've asked him to come and just lay the groundwork for a few minutes for us, and then I'm going to invite the rest of the panelists up, introduce them, and then we'll begin to have a discussion. At the end, we will have a chance for you to ask questions as well, and so want to make sure that you know that you'll have a chance at the very end to ask a handful of questions with a little bit of time we have at the end. So join me in thanking our entire panel, but asking Mike to come up this time.
Thanks, buddy. So I get a lot of questions about AI. I find in life that people are always afraid of what they don't understand, and there is no need, in my opinion, to be afraid of artificial intelligence. So let's get into exactly what it is, and I believe that you can never do any education without reference to history. Back in the 1980s, most companies had mainframes. You remember those big behemoth systems? And at every desk, you had a green screen. And I was not yet working. I was a student. But you'd go up to that green screen, you'd turn it on, and you'd start doing your work, and you'd get these big green bar reports, right? Remember that? Out of the IBM printer, and pump, these things would come out, and you'd read those reports, and then you'd go do something. In the 90s, we had this thing, and in the early 2000s, this birth of something called the internet. And everybody got afraid. Oh my gosh, what's the internet? I send this request away. How do I know this request is real? How do I trust this request? Where is this going? I used to tell people, don't be afraid of the internet. Don't be afraid of cloud computing. You take a plug in your house and you plug it in the wall and you get power. In the old days, everybody had a data center at their company. That's the same thing as you having a power plant at your company. So right away, let's get a fundamental down. Cloud computing is nothing more than data centers, off in remote places, a very, very large scale that is doing your computing processing, much like you plug into the wall and get electricity from a power plant. Now, is it secure? Let me ask you a question. When you go online and you look at your bank account, or you look at your stock portfolio, or you maybe even look at your pictures, where's the data center at that those are kept? Where's the software that protects it? Right. You don't have a clue. Right? Protocols in the world has been doing things that AI do fundamentally for some time. But the fundamentals of AI is what scares people because suddenly they go, wow, what's this ChatGPT? This thing thinks for me. It's taking away all my ability to think. Not the case at all. Go out, not right now, but open your iPhone when you get back to your car. If you have ChatGPT, ask it how it feels. It will give you a response right away. I don't know consequence. I only am programmatic. I cannot tell you what it is to feel. So what is AI? And why today is AI something that was not here, let's say, 5-10 years ago like it is today? Data. Back in the 80s and the 90s, we had the algorithm to create AI. Two things are required for artificial intelligence: a staggering amount of data, information, and a staggering amount of power. Anybody's heard of NVIDIA? Chip company, has the biggest capital market value in the world now, passing Microsoft 2 days ago. That chip that came out of the gaming industry is powerful enough to power what we call both structured and some unstructured data. But the bottom line is it's the chip that finally fuels with the cloud. Remember I just told you about data centers, cloud? The power plants. We now have enough power. So, same algorithm, also referred to as machine learning or LLMs, language learning models, sit in between a ton of data, the internet, and a ton of power, data centers. In the past, wasn't enough data, wasn't enough power. So when you think of artificial intelligence and people talk about, oh God, it's the Terminator, these things are coming alive, we're going to get attacked, right? Take it easy. That's not the case. We're going to talk on the panel about this in many different ways why that's not the case. Now, is there ethics that come around artificial intelligence? Yes. What happens if you give the algorithm or the machine learning, the language learning model, bad data? Bad result. How do you ensure that the data is good? Ethics, cybersecurity. Power. How do we make sure that power that is so desperately needed, maybe some of you saw, Microsoft did I think it was a $280 million deal with Constellation Energy tying up power that isn't even made yet in Ohio. And earlier this week, the same kind of deal was done down in Illinois to capture the reactors by Google. Because they have so much data, they know how much power they're going to require to make these AI agents, as we call them, more and more effective. But look, this is the way you should think, and we're going to talk a lot about this. In the old days, you had to be a developer. You had to go to college and get a double E, electrical engineering major, computer science major, et cetera, et cetera. AI removes complexity. Everywhere I travel in the world, I can tell you that is the goal of AI, to remove complexity. I don't care how old you are, I don't care what you do, your skill set and your knowledge, your wisdom, where education and experience meet. Wisdom is created. Wisdom cannot fall into AI. Maybe eventually the data is going to get so big that we can figure out how you feel today, but that's pretty tough. But there are layers and things that are being done in an ethical way as these things grow because they know that they're going to be exceptionally accountable. But the reality is AI is here to remove complexity. You will be able to program and create by giving the agent your idea. It will go do all the monotonous tasks of invoicing, marketing, all these different things. Not all of marketing, not the creativity necessarily. Maybe eventually it will. But the idea is remove the developer, put in you. AI will take care of all those monotonous functions. It has enough data, and this data keeps growing over time. The power, this is getting tight already. This is going to be interesting to see what happens. But keep in mind, this is changing very fast. And we're not going to get into this because I could geek out on this big time. I'm a geek. This thing can do things what we call generative AI and then deep learning AI and things where people say this language learning model almost reaches consciousness to achieve greater efficiency because what it's being fed is exponentially more and more and more and more data. So when we look at the learning curve, typically we see things go like this. With AI, you will see this change, sorry about the crude thing here, more like this. Because it's going to exponentially pick up speed, provided it gets enough power. The internet, you ever go anywhere and everybody wants your information, right? Would you like that printed off? Would you like me to email that to you? Everywhere you go, could you put in your da-da-da-da? Could you tell us a little about you? They all want access to your data. Data is gold, and we're going to get into that a lot in this panel. But fundamentally, that's AI. An algorithm that's been around a long time, that keeps improving, but today that algorithm is effective because it has enough data and enough horsepower to process a result. That brings you benefit. Historically, not enough of this existed, and not enough of this existed. This did. And these keep getting better and better and better, which means it's going to process more and more and more data faster and more effective. So AI learns. It gets more effective. But it can't tell you how it feels. And we'll talk about that. So we're going to bring the panel up, I think. Ben's going to ask us a bunch of questions. Did that make sense? Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Conley, for getting us started. And let me introduce the other panelists. You may have already seen these online, but let me more formally introduce them. David Schneiderman, to my right, is a professor at Lake Forest College. And when I first met him, I just realized he's in charge of this big AI initiative, got a big grant from the Mellon Foundation. It's helping the university think through this. And I saw that he was a humanities and an entrepreneurship professor. And I thought, I've never seen that combination before. So you're going to get to hear from him, and excited to do that. Thanks for being here. To his right is Dr. Matthew Epinette. He is the executive director at the Center for Bioethics that I mentioned earlier. That is at Trinity University. So he leads both the master's programs, but also some of the research and other components there. He did his PhD out at Fuller Seminary, and so he sits in that space in between culture and theology and ethics, and so that's the land which he did. And he's the one who taught the class that I mentioned earlier. If you're looking for the more ethical side of it, and coming from a more traditional Christian ethics perspective, that is where Dr. Epinette, the space he's in. And then to his right is William Ajay. William has spoken at several Lakelight events before. He's a commercial real estate leader and broker, works for KBC, a director for that organization, was at CBRE, a big commercial real estate group in the area for 20 years, and has a ton of experience. When I look at all those like sales numbers, you see numbers like 5 billion and sort of like explaining what it is that he has done. But William has been thinking about this both personally and inside of his company for a long time. He's been my longest dialogue partner around AI things for a couple years now, just so I'm kind of constantly learning about ways he's implementing this in his life or in his business. And so thank all of you for being here. Let me start, and we'll just kind of go down the row, because I ask, as Mike is introducing AI from his perspective, each of you have had to do this at different levels, but if you're just, adding on to let's start with the level playing field, what have you found helpful if you've explained artificial intelligence to people inside of your communities or spaces where you're walking?
Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you for that wonderful overview. It's really a pleasure to be here. So I'm David Schneiderman. I'm a professor of English at Lake Forest College. I was for many years the provost and dean of faculty, and now I am the director of something called the Cribs Center for the Humanities. You may have heard of it if you live in the area. And I'm also the chair of the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program, which we also think of as a program in creativity. That's the link with the humanities. Right now, I direct a grant from the Mellon Foundation about AI and humanities and a new interdisciplinary minor in the topic. The point of all of this is that I believe that we must train our students and anyone who's interested in the ethics of artificial intelligence. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and you don't need to be a machine learning specialist to have a say in the ethical development of this technology. So that's often the way we get scared by it, right? So much of this is Silicon Valley language, it's words maybe average English professors don't understand, and you can begin to feel as if you're being led into a reality that you may or may not want. That could be the evil robot future. We could talk about that. But before we get to those negatives, there are many, many positives to the technology, as I think you did a great job of talking about. One, it can give you a personal assistant that can do things to make your life easier and better, whether that's in your personal or your professional world. And if you can learn to use it ethically to augment your humanness in your thinking, rather than replace yourself with bot language, you will find it to be an accelerator in many ways. And I think anyone who is in school today, whether that's kindergarten through 12th grade, or college, or graduate school, or earlier in their career, or frankly, anyone who's not just a few years away from retirement, is probably already dealing with some of the shock waves of the technology. So very briefly, I use it all the time as an English professor. Let me give you an example. I have taught freshman composition more times than I would like to tell you about right now. And I have circled many commas on pieces of paper over the years. Sometimes I get tired. Sometimes I miss a comma. Sometimes. Well, I could have a bot, a machine, get all the commas for me. Is that cheating? Am I derelict in my duty? Well, isn't the goal to tell the student about the comma errors? Well, then maybe my job is to explain to them their misuse of commas rather than circle all the commas. I could do that, but I could also get ChatGPT to do an adaptive learning exercise to allow the student to improve their comma usage. And before long, and not everyone in my field likes this, many people hate it, I'm no longer the first violin in the orchestra, I'm the learning conductor of educational technology. That's the big transition that's happening in my field right now. Some of it is about plagiarism, and that's certainly happening, and it's happening all the way through the lower schools as well. But I think institutions that are going to be on top of this educationally are going to not be stuck in old modes of doing things. Just like a grade is a proxy for learning. You probably all know someone who got a good grade in a class but didn't learn anything, and someone who got a poor grade but learned a lot. The grade isn't what is important. The learning is what's important. And I would argue a little bit controversially that writing a paper is not what's important. It's the thinking behind the paper. And I believe that there are ways to use the technology to do that effectively and to keep the human in the loop.
We may come back to that one. That'll be fun.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And, my own thoughts are very similar. I also teach students, and so, thinking through the learning process, the student development process, that's all part of what I give thought to when it comes to AI. In the introduction, he did a very good job of talking about data, information, and wisdom, and how those are not the same thing. And the AI sort of starts with data, and it can turn it into information for us, but whence the wisdom? And so those are the questions that I'm interested in, is how do we make use of this information in ways that are wise? And then, of course, right in the name of the center, human dignity. How do we uphold human dignity? How do we move toward human flourishing? And so in what ways does AI assist in that? And in what ways does AI work against human flourishing and the upholding of human dignity? So those are really the issues that I'm kind of centered on when it comes to AI.
Well, thank you. And when I think of AI, I think initially of the fact that it is a tool. If you surf the internet, if you've used a knife, if you've driven a car, they're all tools. They enable and empower human activity of various kinds. But as humans, as in everything we do, we have a way of overextending or over-rotating on how we use good things, or sometimes even just neutral things. And so that brings us into the area of thinking about what is the right use of AI? Where does it advance the mind, the creativity, the intelligence, the skills, the abilities, the unique gifts that we all have? Where does it help and enhance and support that? And then when does it usurp human agency? And that's a big question for me as I think about, we were made, as believers, of those who would build that orientation would consider themselves made with a divine imprint. Humans are unique because they're made a certain way. And so in our engagement and use of AI, where do we usurp that? Where do we dilute that? Where do we take that away? And on the other hand, where do we enhance that? And so looking forward to talking more. There's a lot more layers there, but that's a starting point for me. And I'd love to share also how I've been using it and seen it used and what I think about where it might be going.
So the way we organize the panel is we're doing 4 movements tonight. That's the end of movement 1, just level set, playing, let people have some introduction. What we want to do next is we want to start positive. So we want to look at the developments, the things that are good, directions that AI is taking us that pretty much, that most people can agree can be positives in society, positives in our lives. After that, we're going to go the opposite way. What's the shadow side? What's the risk? Where do we need to be cautious? And then at the end, we're going to hand it over to you. And the last thing is we're going to say, what questions do you have? What would you like to hear the panelists to talk about? So we're going to move into the positive side of things. And Mike, I'd like to come back to you kind of to start. So in your space, where have you seen sort of positive developments and AI is moving forward again? It could be cybersecurity or business or whichever direction you want to go here.
Well, I think one of the big ones, and from being in the perspective of everybody in the room, I think for all of us, right, healthcare is a big deal. I think when we look at any type of rare disease or even common disease, people aren't aware of what AI is already doing to be incredibly effective at moving those things forward. Collaboration is something that AI allows. When we build an AI, we typically call them an agent, right? That agent does its work based on a set of data, what I put up on the board. But imagine if that agent had access to not just one hospital's data, but the world's data. They didn't look at one patient and their genetic disease, but they looked at the entire world of 6 billion people and how many had the genetic disease. AI is going to be able to share through multi-protocol, something called an agentic web, which I won't get into, but it's going to be able to do things that allows people in healthcare to look and solve disease quickly because of wisdom and knowledge, meaning access to data. What was the old world? It was the doctor. How many patients did I see? I'm sure many of you, I know I've taken my son and daughter actually into the Lake Forest ER, and it's a nightmare. I mean, you just sit there and you wait, and it's horrible and whatnot. AI is going to change those realities because your information, your data, your genetic problem, whatever it may be, will be there, protected, secured. We'll talk about that. But it is going to give collaboration amongst 6 billion people, and it'll allow people to solve problems because of the AI agent being able to digest all that data at super high speed and say, look, here's the problem, here's how we fix it. And the beautiful part about it is it's learning all the time. It never stops learning. So for me, there's so many positive things, but I think that relates to everybody who's in the healthcare industry. So many simple things and so many advancements are starting to happen so fast because of the collaboration around the data. Doesn't mean your name is on there. It means your information, right? HIPAA still applies. Take your name away. They just look at the problem you have and look at that makeup and say, anybody named XR235, that could be Mike Conley, with this genetic makeup, here's the problem. He's got diabetes. This is the cure. This is for him how it works. Boom, initiate the following proteins. That's where it's going. Take the shot, problem solved. That is the beauty of what sharing and data and collaboration can do. Now, there's risk to that. If you don't put up the proper protocols, if you don't protect this, and we'll get into that, but that is where, to me, it is incredibly exciting. Because when you look at even all of us as people of faith, people say to me, well, Conley, AI could be like, really bad stuff. Bad guys can leverage it to do bad things at scale, just like good guys can do it at scale. So, true. And the problem is bad guys already collaborate. If you see what I see in the dark web, you would blow your mind how bad guys collaborate and good guys don't collaborate. AI is allowing that to change at scale. So to me, there's so much good, healthcare being the big one, and you're going to see those advances starting to happen very, very quickly. And I'll give you one other thing to think about. In all my years of technology, whether it be on the military side, whether it be in the corporate side, there is a saying I live by for every company that I have ever built. If you don't like change, you're going to hate extinction. You can't stop this genie, folks. The bottle is out. So don't fear it. Learn it. You're not going to go, I'm going to stand in front of this thing, and it's too late. And it's learning faster and faster. But things like this and this kind of communication are very important for everybody. Because believe me, this is going to do great things.
Yeah, so healthcare, medical, that's a big one.
Huge.
Let's go back to education. And Davis, where are you seeing some positive trends? And
So there's lots of interesting ways that AI is being used in education, and this goes through K-12 up through colleges and universities. One way is with predictive analytics, and so bigger institutions than Lake Forest College, we do this in a small way, but larger places would know if a student is at risk of dropping out or transferring because they would have various data points, right? Does the student swipe their lunch card? Does the student show up for practice? In the old days, humans have to call each other and connect that. But if you can get over the surveillance questions, and there are real ethical issues here, you could know more quickly when someone is in an at-risk situation. That's one way. Another way is having 24/7 availability of help and information. You know, I can't answer a student email at 11 o'clock at night, but an AI bot that is appropriately trained on the topic and has the guardrails around it can provide information to the student when they need it. Now, that can quickly go in the wrong direction, but that availability is something that's very useful. There's also, this is a third thing, an old saying, maybe you've heard it, that a marker of success, whether a child is going to be successful, is whether books are present in their home. I don't know, has anybody ever heard that before? It has nothing to do with whether people read the books or not. Books are a marker of values in terms of a socioeconomic position. If you come from a family with X amount of means, they probably have books in the home. Whether anybody ever reads those books or not is secondary. So it has something to do with privilege and the ability that folks have for language acquisition and training. But we all know that students start and come from many different perspectives, whether it's economically or for mental health issues. So this technology can be an aid for students who maybe are starting at a deficit in a particular area. They can use it when they need it to learn particular information. Or I'll give you an example. About 3 years ago, I knew very little about artificial intelligence other than what it was, and I decided, for reasons that have to do with my job, that I wanted to educate myself on it. The easy things to learn for me were the ethical materials, because I am trained in philosophy and other things of that kind. The harder things for me were the math and the machine learning. But I have used a lot of AI to teach myself the basic concepts. So if I were to encounter a technical paper that I wanted to understand, I could spend a long time reading it and not really get anywhere. But I could use ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot to summarize that with these instructions. Explain it to me like I'm in 10th grade, right? And when that isn't working, now make that 8th grade. You know, I can take it down and I can dial it up. And over that time, if you are discerning enough to understand what you don't know and not trusting enough to just take anything as truth, you can really use the technology to accelerate your learning. And I teach students how to do that all the time with appropriate ethical boundaries.
Let me just take one step back. My field is bioethics, which probably you've heard the term, but might not know exactly what that means. But really, it's just what we should and should not pursue when it comes to matters of life and health. And so, to piggyback on what Mike has said, the diagnostic capabilities of AI, bringing together so much data, is enormous. It's helping to discover connections between what's called orphan diseases. Those are diseases that so few people get. There's, just to be kind of crass about it, there's no money in trying to find a cure for it. But AI can bring together sets of people that have commonalities and kind of emphasize the need for a cure there. If you've ever watched an episode of House, a big part of that is the differential diagnosis. What could be going on here? I mean, that AI excels at the differential diagnosis. We have these symptoms. It could be this, this, or this. I mean, and again, when you've got this giant data set of all of these other diagnostic procedures and all of these other things, and so we're already seeing really good results with that. Some of the areas that are still kind of under development is what is the relationship between the physician, the nurse, the technician, and the AI. And so they're like reading mammograms, for example. What works best? Does it work best if the human does that first and then the AI, or vice versa? Does it work well if we just leave it to the AI? And so those are areas you talk about not liking change. I mean, this is areas of change, and they're iterating very quickly on what these things do. And all of this is to help to promote health and wellness and the betterment of human beings. And so, in terms of in my area of study, the good things about AI are so much wrapped up in the healthcare field, and it's lousy with data, and what they're trying to mine from it is the information so that they can act wisely for the benefit of patients.
From a business perspective, and I suspect many of us here would be fairly familiar with some of the use cases, it used to be, and think of a scenario where you're in a meeting with people within your firm or other partners, and you're spending maybe about an hour, various contributors with different kinds of information. Before the world of Microsoft Teams or Zoom, that would be a group of people sitting around physically, and you might have an assistant, or you yourself might be taking notes. And one of the challenges, as you can very well relate in that environment, is the division of your attention from trying to capture really good notes and also be able to listen and engage and contribute meaningfully. And you try to multitask and do the best you can. When you're done with that, then you go around and visit with others to make sure that you can get their copy of their notes so you can consolidate everything. And maybe about 2 or 3 weeks later, you then have a summary that you can send, hey, the meeting we had at the beginning of April, well, here's a summary from the meeting, and here's some of the action items that we want to go and implement. You fast forward to the world of Zoom, and as you, again, are very much aware of this, you now have the ability to transcribe and in real time capture every word from every participant. And then today, that information, the moment you're done meeting, will be immediately transcribed into an interactive meeting summary. And you can actually have instructions to have graphs, reports, charts that are prepared, and an entire action plan with dates, deliverables, owners, and outcomes, and measures tied to those outcomes. Tomorrow, there will be agents that will actually begin to work on those things, so that by the time you get to your desk or get back to the next meeting, maybe about half of the work is already done. The other side of that, obviously, is, and we'll get into this, what does that mean? What are the implications for work? And here's a more stark example. I recently worked on a project very similar to a type of project I would have worked on 10 years ago, which would have involved about 30 people over a 6-month period, having multiple interviews, transcribing them, and then building process diagrams, playbooks, manuals, and other policy documents, and then presented in a very nice package, printed at Kinko's or FedEx, shipped via mail, and it would be on someone's desk later on at the end of a 120-day process. I recently worked on a very similar project, and the only participant was me. I interviewed about 35 people. I had reams and reams of information from each of those interviews, and immediately that was in a tool that I could interrogate and have all of the different types of outputs and deliverables in a very automated way, just very quickly available to me. And I just kept thinking, the army of 20 or 30 people that I would have been working on this, that the amount of times I've been on a plane, traveling to go and have a day-long meeting somewhere, all that was done online in my home office with just me and done immediately. So what does that mean for the 20 people that are no longer being employed to write paper and take notes? I think what it really does is it changes the types of activities that we as humans need to start thinking about. So it's no longer about how well can I transcribe. It's about having the wherewithal and the mindset and framework to step back and ask higher order questions. What is important to work on? What is important to not do? What are the more strategic decisions that we should be making? And so it sort of frees you up or creates a little bit more bandwidth to be able to actually do more higher valuable things than just rote, manual, automated work. I think the topic of human agency for me means that there's certain things that are uniquely human that I believe that we as humans should continue to own and not cede. That window, some would argue, can be changing or getting narrower in some sense. But there are many things that could be automated using AI that it really doesn't make sense for humans to do. There used to be a saying, it's not AI that will take your job, it's someone using AI that will take your job.
Yeah.
And I think today we'll even say it's AI using AI that will take your job. And so what does that mean for us? And I think there's a very good discussion around what happens in that new world where agents that are AI agents are using AI to support a lot of what we do. So it's very fascinating. And the primary reasons businesses do this is to reduce risk, to save time and be more efficient, and to reduce cost. It's really just why businesses do it.
And because their competitor does it. This is what I mean by change. You can say, I'm not going to do it, and you'll say it right out of business. Because the change is going to happen. As much as you may like it or not like it, the change is going to happen, right? That's where the old saying comes from, right? If you don't like change in business, you're going to hate extinction. I can point to those on the Dow are the top 10 companies in the world from 10 years ago. Look at that list today. Where'd they go? 7 are gone. Refused to change. Whatever happened to Kodak? Remember them? Kodak. What happened? Refused to change. People will stick with paper pictures. This digital thing is a complete joke. We're going to photo, those little booths, they're never going to change. People want to hold their pictures. How'd that work out for you? So,
My mom is watching. She still has lots of paper photos and like.
hey, Karen's got a
all
few,
this.
but
Hey,
she's
Mom.
got that. She's like,
that's right.
get these digitized, Mike. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, 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 yes.
So, William, you said something really interesting about it being uniquely human, and Matthew, I want to come to you on this. So, anytime there's technological change, one of the things it actually forces in your field, in theology, in Christian circles, is it often clarifies different doctrines. Like when Industrial Revolution happened, it sort of clarified the ways people think about work and other things. I would assume that just the basic Christian understanding of a human is being clarified by how much AI is overlapping with humanity. Are you seeing some of that, and can you help us think through maybe how that would be a positive thing, a positive way we can see this?
Yeah, it really has. There's been a lot of work done on sort of the boundaries around what it means to be human. This is, one of my colleagues calls this bioethics 2.0. So bioethics 1.0, these were the life and death issues, abortion, euthanasia, reproductive technologies. Bioethics 2.0 are these, what are the boundaries of the human being? Where do we draw the lines? This is human, this is not human. I had a book chapter published last year on e-persons. This is a new concept. They have it it's actually beginning to make its way into the law in Europe, and I think it'll come here as well, of some measure of rights, but not human rights, but e-person rights. What does that look like? How do we differentiate between the human and the non-human? And as we look at things like the Neuralink brain-computer interfaces, these begin to raise some really interesting questions about the sort of boundaries of the body, the boundaries of the mind, and how much of a person do we replace and we still have a human being, or a cyborg, and where do we draw those lines? What's the sort of gray area of overlap, and how do we think about that? And then the other piece that I think is beginning to help clarify for people is how we think about the good life. What does it mean to have a good life? I mean, we all have some concept of that, even if it's only implicit. You're talking about timeless wisdom or ancient wisdom. One of the ways that this was phrased in old times was the good life for man is the good life, is contemplating the good life for man. And of course, in ancient times, they really did mean the man. But there are a variety of ways that we can think about it. Alistair McIntyre is a philosopher. He died a couple of weeks ago at 96 years old down at Notre Dame. And he says that the good life is to come to as complete a knowledge of God as is possible. And so I think that these AI conversations are really starting to push us to think about, well, what is really important to me, and what are the ways in which AI helps me go in that direction, and what are ways in which AI maybe pulls me away from that direction? So, for Christians, the good life, or coming to a complete knowledge of God, is through Christ. And so what are ways in which the AI helps me develop my relationship with Christ? But other things are important to us as well. Our family, our friends, meaningful work. What are ways in which AI helps us to lean into those things? And what are ways in which, it's pulling me away from my family. It's pulling me away from, I'm wasting time here. I'm not doing good, meaningful, productive work. And so I think it's really helping to clarify some of those sorts of questions and really get us to think about what is it that we're really pursuing at our core, and how does AI help that, and how does it hinder at that?
Yeah. Davis, from the humanities perspective, are you seeing are students wrestling with some of those same questions?
Certainly, and I really like what you said as an ideal. I think from my perspective, I worry that the boundary between what was once clearly human and what will be transhuman or machine is about to get much fuzzier and less clear. If you think about, I'm wearing glasses, that doesn't make me a cyborg, right? It's an external thing, but I need them. I'm in big trouble without them. Occasionally, I forget where I put them, and then I'm in big trouble. If you have a pacemaker, are you now a cyborg? By some definitions, you are. You're referring to Neuralink. This is one of Elon Musk's many companies, and you could find this video online. There is a man who does not have the use of his arms. He's a paraplegic, and he has a graphene implant in his brain, and it allows him to move a cursor by thinking to play chess. You could imagine when something like this becomes more common, right, like a wire heading process, that people who are at a, quote, deficit will then get implants to overcome those deficits. But you could also imagine people who don't have those deficits very quickly wanting, why should I be wasting my time typing? Over 50 years, there's an ergonomic pain that you pay for that. So I think the way that the human body will become enhanced by technology, aided by artificial intelligence, is about to get very complicated very quickly. You've got the body having more metallic portions into it, and then you can also have the other idea of human minds being uploaded or being placed into robot bodies or things like that. That all sounds like science fiction, and it's far away, but it's not as far away as we might be led to think by our science fiction, or at least the ethical questions that are raised by it are ones that are really interesting. And I'll end just with this. I would say that even our values of what we believe to be human, outside of a faith-based environment which gives you a firm grounding, are fairly fluid. No one wakes up in the year 800 AD and says, did I follow my feelings? Did I talk to my therapist? Am I centered? Did I do hot yoga today? Our ideas of what we do to find our common inner peace are also not immune to the way our culture represents those issues. So I think this is all very complicated.
Yeah. So let's transition to some of the risk and the caution side. And Mike, I want to come to you on this because one of the things you said earlier, you live in a cybersecurity space, and I've heard you tell some stories that sort of blow my mind. But there are artificial intelligence, there's positives developments that are happening to sort of help us stay on the defensive, but obviously you also see some of the shadow side as well. So talk to us a little bit about that space specifically, and both sides of the coin. And so start with maybe the positive side and then get into where we might see some risk from your perspective.
Yeah, to not become totally techie and geek out, I want you to think of a warehouse. In the center of the warehouse, there's a giant pile of gold. That gold represents your money, your data, everything that's critical to you personally or to your company. There are 2 doors to get into this warehouse. And in the old days, you put SEAL Team 6 at each door, you were secure. No one was coming in unless you said yes or no. In the modern world, because now you have to do business in a supply chain, people have to come in and out of your network. You're all familiar with it. Your information is out in the net. That warehouse doesn't have 2 doors, it has 10,000 doors. And you can't afford to put SEAL Team 6 at each door. That is the fundamental of the cyber threat. How do I protect my information, my data, whether it's a company or you personally? And what happens if you don't do that? Somebody else steals it, or somebody else. Even, the PRC, the People's Republic of China will tell you, look, if it's on the internet, it's free, right? That's our big international business problem, is that they just steal it. Well, it was on the internet. We took it. That's it. That's the way it is. Now, no matter how you feel about that, you hear about it all the time, but it is a real threat. So in the cyber world, our job is always to do this. You can't secure a company or a person out of existence. You can't put so much software and process around a company that they can't conduct business. They must go through those doors. So how do you make them secure? Well, you have to make the data smart enough and the process smart enough to know which doors it will do business with. Now along comes AI. And AI can do a nice job of impersonating looking like someone you should open the door for. And it doesn't do it 1 door at a time, it does it 10,000 doors at a time. It just sits there 24/7 until one of the doors opens and in it goes. Now, that's a very fundamental way of thinking about it, right? Some of these hacks that you've read in the paper come in through what we call the supply chain, your suppliers, or your supplier's supplier, or your supplier's supplier. They have a virus. They're not as secure as you are, but you have to let them in the door because maybe they're, well, I don't know, CrowdStrike, who just had this incident happen to them 3 months and 2 months ago. And they've got over $1 billion of lawsuits on their hands because they didn't test a patch properly, rolled it out, and it crippled a lot of their clients. Now, was that a cyber hack? Yes and no, but it's indicative of what happens in cyber every day. There are organizations, people, processes all over the world that just have one thing to do: steal your information or hack in a company, what we call the Active Directory, gain control of it so that they can ransomware you. If you get control of this thing called the Active Directory, think of it as a telephone book. Think of it as this thing that says, okay, here's Ben Dockery. Ben has the authority, he's the CEO, to access any file he wants. If I can get in and gain control of that Active Directory, who's here and what their authorities are, I own you. Because I will say, guess what? I don't want to do any backups. I don't want to do any data. In fact, I'm shutting it all down and I'm changing the passcode. And everybody says, hey, what's happening? We're offline. What's going on? What's going on? You've been ransomwared. Send us 20 million in Bitcoin to the following address, and we will release the code of your Active Directory. So I can go way deep and on, but there are definite threats to it. But look.
Well, and if I could,
Yeah.
this is a big problem in healthcare. We've seen several hospital systems shut down over these kind of hacks.
Well, it's the real deal. So those hacks have been going on before AI. AI can just accelerate those. Remember what I told you about data? If data is bad, AI engines, remember the thing in the middle, the machine learning thing, right? Those things can produce what we call hallucinations. Bad results because they got bad data. Remember, AI is math. A lot of data, an algorithm, a lot of power. They come together. So there's a lot of things we do now in cybersecurity to leverage AI, but it almost always involves a human being. I'll give you a quick example. In Blue Voyant, what we do is we are 24/7 all over the world looking at our clients' cyber threats, either the military, we'll take the Navy. In the Navy, this is a known contract. There is the Columbia-class submarine. We are building 15 of them. They cost about $12 billion per boat. We look at every single piece of technology that's going to go on that Columbia-class submarine to ensure that that piece and the supplier's supplier and the supplier's supplier's supplier has no virus that's going to go on that boat. Okay? It's very important to us. We want to make sure that once that thing sails, it's going to work. Or take a missile system. We call them LRASMs, long-range air-to-surface missile systems that come off battleships and whatnot. We have to make sure that everything touches that goes into that missile is absolutely clean, no viruses. That the accelerant was made someplace that we trust so that we know when they say they have 80 grams of accelerant inside that system and that diode is going to follow exactly what the chip tells it, that in fact it's been tested and it's going to work. General Dynamics just puts all the pieces together. All those different things come from different places. Who's making sure a virus wasn't put in? So AI helps us with that tremendously. We can look at a staggering amount of data and go up and down the supply chain and go, this is good. And you put, without geeking out on you, all sorts of things in that process to ensure that that AI agent doesn't get clean access all the way through to the critical data. It has to go through a layer. More and more, it's called an MCP. We're not going to get into it, but it's a layer that protects, like a wall, an AI agent from another AI agent. Because we need security in between to ensure nothing bad can happen. And if it does, you back it out. And I can go on this for a long time, but there are definite threats, but to every threat, there is also a countermeasure. And I would tell you the really nice thing, in my opinion, in cyber, is that AI, I think, is doing more to the good, way more to the good than it is to the bad when it comes to cyber.
So another threat, William, you mentioned, I can't remember if you said it was 30 or 50 people that used to be a part of this, and now you can do it single, so by yourself. So one of the big questions people have around this is job displacement. Am I going to lose my job? Who's going to take my job? There's all these quotes by CEOs. So talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in your field and what cautions or risks that are coming from that direction.
One of the classic answers you hear, or if you think about, is as the world and as economies go through every successive cycle of change, there always is a concern about jobs. And if you think of the transition from horse-drawn carts to the automobile industry, keep in mind there were no mechanic shops, there were no, suppliers to General Motors at the time. And think of how massive that industry was spawned after the steam engine and the combustion engine were invented and were starting to allow cars to be deployed on massive scale. What the concern was before then was, well, what are all the janitors or the folks that are cleaning the horse poop off of the streets, what are they going to do? Relearning, retooling, reskilling, and the job opportunities that came as a result of that change were much more significant than what had existed before. The same thing happened with the Industrial Revolution. When you transitioned from agriculture to industry, Ford assembly plant, or think of the technology companies and Microsoft and Google and all these massive technology companies and all the people they're hiring. My company does a lot of work with Amazon. They have 1.5 million people. It started with one person in the garage. It did not exist, and without the internet, it would not exist. So there are places in which new industries are spawned and new opportunities come up, but it does require relearning and retooling and reskilling. And I think it goes back to that human agency question. We are made in the image of God. We are made with fundamental curiosity, and that ability to continue to learn, to be ready for that change, is a constant. That's one thing that we don't drop: continually change, continually learning, continue to adapt. The moment you get stagnant, the moment you settle, the world leaves you behind. There's a change. Pandora's out of the box. It's changing. It's not going to go back. When I think of some of the concerns, I think a couple weeks ago, there was a CEO who, in the middle of their earnings call, he actually exited the meeting and had his avatar. So avatar is a digital representation that can be designed to essentially be indistinguishable from you. And the analysts were not able to tell that he had left the room. He came back and told them this is what had happened. So there are all these different areas that, okay, what lines are you crossing, and how can we be aware, how can we be thoughtful about it? The power of AI is growing very exponentially. That hockey stick you saw is definitely legitimate. So I think, if I'm thinking about, okay, how do I respond in this environment? Continue to learn. Don't think it is just a glorified Google search tool. There's a lot behind it. Be familiar with it. But this is where I think, as a believer, I ultimately sit. God is not surprised. He marks the bookends of time. He is not thinking about his AI strategy. It doesn't throw him off. And even if we get to a very major shift or change, somehow I don't think that God is sitting there thinking, okay, now they've got this thing out of jail and I don't know what to do. We lean on him, we trust him, but we also have to be very wise and aware, continue to learn. And I think some of these important questions that were being raised on ethics and what is it that makes us fundamentally human, and how do we not compromise that even while we're doing really amazing things like mapping out the human genome, or just discovering amazing therapies and different things to help disease and all that. Those are all really, really good, but we can't just have blinders on, because the world is definitely moving on.
So Matthew, in your space, one of the big threats or cautions I've heard a lot about is, you've already mentioned sort of the transhumanists, whether it's Sam Altman's The Merge, or whether it's, are we really going to be able to take a human and take AI and put them together? Is that going to be something new? Is there a singularity moment coming where AI really comes ahead of humans? What should we be thinking about that question?
Yeah, these are all really good questions, whether any of that's going to happen or what it would look like when it does happen. The one thing, I mentioned Neuralink, this Elon Musk, this guy gets stuff done. And so this is a goal of his and a lot of other people, very powerful people and very, very wealthy people. So Google, or Alphabet, Google's controlling company now, they've got a ton of money they're putting into these kinds of things. Elon clearly has a ton of money he's putting into these things. So I don't think we want to underestimate the sort of will to power that's at work here with some of these things. And they're very disruptive. And I think just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, I think this is a real opportunity for our churches to care well for people as they go through this, and for us to care well for our friends and family, kind of no matter what this ends up looking like, but as we go through it. And so just to be aware that our culture really pushes us in some ways to see ourselves as very independent, very singular, very autonomous. And I think these kinds of disruptions can disrupt that kind of thinking and can really provide opportunities for schools to care well for students, for churches to care well for their communities. And I think we want to lean into that. And so back to the question of transhumanism, there are people who are actively looking to merge the human and the machine. There are people who are actively working for uploading consciousness, as he mentioned. These are going to be giant changes, and whether they come all at once, so the idea of the singularity is that basically when artificial general intelligence arrives, if it arrives, it will then build an even more intelligent super intelligence, some people call it, and that things will change very rapidly, and perhaps even in such a state that it's almost like the blink of an eye, and the world will be completely different because we will have within it, at least this is the theory, this super intelligence. And so of all of the disruptions that we could face, that would be the most disruptive of disruptions. And so again, I think we just really want to lean into our humanity, into our vulnerability, and this is the importance of community, the importance of, however you find that, whether you find that in church, which I hope you do, but with your family, with your neighbors, with your faith community, really lean into caring for each other, and I bring this up a lot, and it's the one that I think is really hard for most of us Americans, is allowing ourselves to be cared for. And so as we go through these disruptive processes, and I'm in the midst of a very disruptive process myself. Many of you will know that Trinity is moving, and so that affects everyone. I was in a meeting with one of my colleagues the other day, and he's like, everybody has to move. There's just no one who's going to be staying here. And this is a very ordinary kind of thing. Businesses move all the time. Companies shut down all the time. So it's nothing special that's happening to us, but it's a disruption. So I'm in the midst of this myself and seeing the way in which it's important for me to allow myself to lean on other people as I need to. Yes, there are things I need to be doing. There are things that I need to be pushing forward, but I can't do this alone. And our culture in very many ways pushes us against that. And so I think this is a potential threat from AI, that we would lean into AI more than we would lean into our human friends and our human family. And so trying to keep that all kind of well-ordered and straight in our minds, I think, is a really key thing as we go through this time.
And Davis, you may want to say more about that question as well, but let me ask you this. If, just from a threat in education, if I simply use Copilot or whatever, could I pass your creative writing class? And if so, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I'll start with that, and then if it's okay, I'll loop back to what you were saying here. So about 2 months ago, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, shared a story written by ChatGPT to say, this is a good short story. The prompt was something like, write a metafictional story about grieving, metafiction, fiction about fiction. So the story begins something like, I am a chatbot, and blah, blah, blah. And a famous novelist named Jeanette Winterson then responded and said, this is really good in The Guardian. Like, don't think this is garbage. And so I, in my creative writing class, Introduction to Creative Writing, said to my students who pay no attention to this stuff, we're going to read a new story today that was just written, and I didn't tell them it was written by the machine. I took the name off it. It's called The Machine-Shaped Hand. You can look it up. It's like 3 pages long. And I did a lesson on metafiction. We workshopped it. We all talked about the story. I said, if you were the teacher, what would you give this? Oh, A+, Dr. Schneiderman. This thing is great. And then I said, big reveal. It was written by the machine. Everybody's jaw dropped, and they got very upset. We like to think that these things can't be creative, but you're dealing with the worst versions of them now than you're ever going to deal with. Mm-hmm. They're trained, though, on human intellectual property, which is what allows them to be creative. The risk is that it will change the definition of creativity, and the things that we will value will change. I have an aunt who I love very much who's in her 80s, and she often shares on her Facebook page like AI plants in a garden, you know, and I'll say, I think that's AI, Aunt Mickey. Her name is Myrna, but we call her Mickey, and she goes, are you sure? And I say, well, I think I am sure. The point of fake information, misinformation, or disinformation isn't always, though, to get you to believe that fake things are real. It's to get you to question whether real things are fake. And that's the muddle that we're in now, both politically and in other ways, too. What is actually real? There are significant existential questions at work here. And so now I'll briefly go back to what you were saying. My students want to always talk about the singularity and superintelligence and artificial general intelligence and evil robots in the Matrix, because we've been giving ourselves those science fiction narratives for hundreds of years. Frankenstein, a version of that. Ancient myths of Hephaestus are a version of that. But we also can't allow ourselves to be blinded to the impact of artificial intelligence now. There are massive environmental costs to this technology, right? We like to think that it's clean because we can't see it, but the amount of data centers that need to be built, the amount of energy that every query takes is significant. You might also know that a lot of this work to train these machines is done by humans. It's called reinforcement learning from human feedback. When OpenAI hires people like us with PhDs to do this work, they pay something like maybe $100, $150 an hour. But when people in Kenya do it, of which they've done quite a bit, in Venezuela, in the Philippines, it's pennies on the dollar, and what they're dealing with is horrific pornographic content that you would not want anyone to have to see, right? To train the machines to avoid this. Just like you probably wouldn't approve of sweatshop labor, a lot of terrible human labor goes into these things as well. So aside from the real issues of copyright and intellectual property and creativity, there's a human cost to the technology that the companies in Silicon Valley would like to make invisible. They don't want you to understand those connection points. There's a great new book came out last week called Empire of AI, which is about OpenAI, but is in part all about this. So I believe the ethics is not always about the ethics of 20 years from now, what does it mean to be human? It's the ethics of exactly what you were saying. How do we care for each other today? And that's important whether you're dealing with students, with family, or the way that you spend your money and how you think about the global economic interrelationship supply chain.
So I'm checking the watch. Man, this has been really helpful. Glenn, let me go ahead and make a transition. I forgot to get a microphone, so I have to step over here and pull off the right one. Aaron James, thanks for the note. Handheld 5. We do want to take a few quick questions from you out there, just as we are moving forward. And so if you have a question, you can come right over here to my left, and Glenn, you can just bring the microphone that way. And so
let me jog over.
we don't have tons of time to do this, but we do want to take a handful of questions from you. So, Sean, if you can, I will say this. You all have as many thoughts about this as everybody else. We would encourage you this time to not offer your thoughts, but to ask a question to the panel. So if you would, please keep it short and ask a question. Thanks.
Mike, I totally agree with you that ultimately AI is going to bring more safety to all of us. But until it gets to that point, should we be worried about what we're sharing data-wise individually as Christians, with the thought that someone may weaponize that information on us sometime? Specific, I guess I want to throw out the Palantir sort of issues. If you probably know what I mean by that.
Yeah, I think everybody has to be personally responsible and knowledgeable. This is what I mean about learning. You can never stop learning, right? You have to be very careful with your own personal data. Look, whether we have rules in the US, lots of lawyers, lots of courts, lots of, we're going to put this parameter in place. The world doesn't care. Okay, the world doesn't care. The internet is the world. It is a global flat economy. It is everywhere. So because one country makes a rule doesn't mean the other one's going to follow it. So yes, I think personal data and personal information always must be very careful. I think that the big boys, if you will, I call them if you think of the apocalypse of IT, I always say, the 5 horsemen shall ride: Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Meta. When you've got $3 trillion in cash, next to no debt, you will have the data ultimately. And as you pointed out, it is wickedly expensive to go down this journey. So they, in my opinion, are being responsible because they do have huge accountability in this. And when I go look at what they're doing and how they're doing it, a lot of it does depend or take the assumption that you are going to be smart with your information. There is no excuse for stupidity. Ignorance is acceptable. We all have things to learn, me more than anybody. I realize just how little I know. And I'm telling you that being personally responsible for your own information, for your kids' information, for teaching your children, there is no such thing as a delete button. Let me repeat that. There is no such thing as a delete button. I promise you, my hackers could find anything on anyone, anywhere, after you think, oh, it's deleted, I hit the delete button. Ha! Not a chance, okay? It lives. This comes down to how we raise our kids. We talk about AI and what it does, and is it good, is it bad, or whatnot. Look, how you fundamentally raise your children in the image of God, and how we put our faith first above all things, to me, in my house, means that my kids can take a set of circumstances and reason to a logical conclusion. They probably shouldn't be doing that, or that's probably a bad thing to do. Personal responsibility for us, our information, is no different than how personally responsible we are to raise the next generation. And to me, I'm elaborating on this question a lot, but it's really important, I think, for the room to hear. When you think of why we think something is beautiful, or maybe you can go to AI and it'll give you all the knowledge of the Mona Lisa, or how the gardens smell around, Windsor Castle, or what they look like. But it can't tell you, what it's like to cry. It can't have a conscience. It'll never be able to tell you how to feel or what the smell of the room looks like. To me, faith in our reality that we are mortal, that we're going to die, that we're going to heaven, gives great value to things in life that an AI engine is never going to have, that a computer and a bunch of data with an algorithm and power on the other side aren't going to be able to do. God made us in his image. All those things come from us. I don't fear the change in technology because I know at the end of the day, it's a tool. You have to use that tool. You have to protect your information. Like you can't go accelerating out of this parking lot when you leave here today and act like an idiot, even if there is a traffic light that says, you were supposed to stop at that red light. You have personal responsibility. Don't be afraid. Learn about it. But yes, to your question, it's important.
Good. Right over here? Or which way you headed?
Is there any work being done with using AI for the political situation in our country to try to create some kind of connection with one another?
All right, who wants that one? Tell us who you voted for first. And then if you'll comment.
Many years ago, I voted for Ralph Nader, but that was a long
there we
time
go.
ago.
That is a great answer.
I was young once. There's an interesting experiment by one of the colleges, I can't recall which, that has a bot called Debunk Bot. And it is to neutrally talk to you about your conspiracy theories. So you sit somebody down who believes the world is flat or something like that, and it very calmly tries to talk them out of it. And there's been some interesting research to suggest that that is a good way to neutrally change someone's mind over time. But I think the problem is much more exacerbated in the opposite way. It's the misinformation and disinformation. And it's not so much that the AIs can hallucinate, they can. We all know that they can make up fake information, and there's a reason for that. But it's more that bad actors can use the technology at scale to flood the zone with more mis and disinformation that exacerbates the problem. So I don't believe anyone has really figured it out. It's not, though, that the technology itself is lying to you. It's that the bad people can make it lie faster and more effectively.
Yeah, that's great. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
No, it's good.
I mean, one of the questions we didn't get to was about bias, and are there going to be multiple, AI sources where you say, if I believe this, then this is my AI source, and if I believe this, I'm going to go this direction. I know that. It's one of the speculations. So let's go to the audience I think we have time for 2 more questions.
You talk of AI as being a tool, and when I think of tools, I think of being in control of that tool. Could you address AI rewriting its own code and what that means for our future, particularly in alignment of purpose?
Great, thanks.
You want
Get
me to
a
take-
couple different
Who
people
wants to
here.
take that? I can take it if you guys want. So there are different levels of AI, right? We have fundamental or basic AI, and then we have what some people call generative AI, and then we have what we call deep learning AI. Remember that thing in the middle once again? That's why I put it up there, right? There's an algorithm. And the more data and the more power, the system says, listen, I know the algorithm says 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 12, but you know what? I got all this data. I can do it a lot faster if I just say 2 times 6. Can I do it? And we say, sure. It improves the algorithm, and it goes faster. I know I can say 6 times 6 times 6 times 6 times 6 is good, but can I just say 6 to the 4th power? Sure. It improves the algorithm. What she's talking about is, we're not there yet, but eventually AI will start improving on its own that language learning model because it gets so much data and so much power, and it can provide you a faster, better result because it has to. It can't keep doing the formula the old way when the data gets exponential. Now, we are a ways from this getting more and more and more effective. But think back to something like healthcare. When you have that much data, the algorithm that was written 2 years ago is not going to cut it. Remember the hockey stick? As this thing gets faster and learns and goes more, you will give it deep learning capability so that it can fix the algorithm. Some people say, oh my gosh, it's like it's getting conscious. It's getting conscious, right? It just keeps feeding and fixing itself and da-da-da-da-da. We're a hell of a long way from that. You might see people doing it in this little instant of one AI agent. But there are all sorts of circuit breakers people think about, and I talked about it earlier, and I would really geek out here if I started talking about MCP, something IBM did. That brings a layer between AI agents, or A2As, which is letting agents talk to agents, and they have something called an agentic web, where you and I aren't involved. Agents are just talking to agents and doing stuff, okay? There are layers and protocols that I could talk about you won't understand, but basically there are circuit breakers being put in for that reason. If I think of cybersecurity, I think of all the alerts that come inside to our org, maybe 30 million inside 24 hours. Alerts from every endpoint. Endpoint is a computer, a cell phone, a camera, anything. It's called an endpoint. And it puts off alerts, right? I'm in trouble, I'm sick, or I'm not patched correctly, or someone's trying to hack into me. These little alerts come into something called a SIM. It's a correlation engine. 30,000, we see them from all over the world. AI agents look at that to find out which one of those are all just a bunch of junk and noise. The 5% that are left, humans grab. Because only a human can go, whoa, that's a real problem. The agent just picked out the 5%. These are critical hacks that are happening. These are real time. We need to call the CIO, we need the CEO. We need to stop these things coming in. That's done by humans. Agent can't there. Long ways from doing that. So yes, it will happen based on needing it, but breakers and things of that sort are definitely being built for that, especially in the military side, I can tell you.
I think it's also helpful to keep in mind that there are some natural physical limitations to AI. There's only so small that transistors can get. And I think Mike probably knows more accurate than I would, but you used to have 100,000 transistors on the head of a chip. There's a future scenario where you can get to 1 trillion transistors on the head of a chip, where the size of that transistor is so atomic that it starts to have behaviors that resemble a quark. Those who are into science would know what that is. But they basically would pass through membranes. Beyond then, you can't really get any smaller than that, so there's a limit to that. There's also the question of power. These transistors, these data centers require a lot of energy, and there isn't enough energy to really power
That's the big thing.
Infinite continuation in the explosion of the power of AI. Will there be some innovation to find a new power source or convert something like water or hydrogen to kind of explode the power that's available? Potentially, but we're not there yet. We're a long ways from that. I mean, the last thought is that AI is still very much contained in a box. We're just on the edge of starting to have robots that will now be embodiments, physical embodiments of AI. We're not there yet, but even then you're going to get into a lot of different complexities to be able to have that rolled out. So I'm just mentioning the fact that there are like physical and scientific limits to what AI can do from a power, form factor, and just the pure science of it.
So let's do this. I know we're over time here, and I'd ask, some of our panelists actually have other commitments tonight, believe it or not, and so they have to jump. Others have said they'll stick around and ask your questions afterwards, so if you're in the room, love for you to come up and talk to anyone who is able to come and stay. I did ask Mike Woodruff. Mike is the chairman of the board for Lakelight and has been a part of this. Just to kind of offer, as we close this, we know we're raising tons of questions and curiosities. Some of them are more fearful, but just, Mike, just bring it all together if you would. No,
Sure.
Not really.
Right.
What I did is just wanted to say, Mike, you're a pastor of a church. You're leading this. You're helping us direct and think through this. So just as we head out of here, send us out of here with, perspective, eternal perspective, and as a church, how to think about some of this as well. So
I have 20 seconds of theological reflection, but first, can we give our panel a hand? I'm not sure we exhausted the topic tonight, and if we did, of course, it would be different tomorrow morning. So AI would not sleep while we rested, but thank you. You've given us much to think about, different perspectives, very helpful. And we do want to say that as there are topics, so you got this card, and there's a website, and there's a way that you can dial into Lakelight and let us know the kinds of topics that would be helpful for you to hear about. Obviously, 90 minutes on the one hand is sort of mind-bending and frying, and we're probably ready at the end of the day to be done. On the other hand, we need a lot more time on some of these things. So again, thank you. And I'll just say this. I mean, I'm listening to the different perspectives, so fun and so interesting, and I'm hearing William say, you don't have to worry, it's not going to get any smaller than 1 trillion chips on the head of the pin. As I marvel about that, I also marvel about the God who created this world. And while this takes us down a little Tower of Babel kinds of stuff that can make me a little bit nervous, I rest deeply in the providence of God and in His design in the universe that's even more amazing than what we heard about tonight. So be encouraged. God wins. None of this is surprising Him. And thanks for being here tonight, and we hope to see you back.
Thanks again.
That was a pleasure, buddy.
On the paths of His righteousness, I will honor His name, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I will fear no evil, for He's with me to the end. The Lord is my shepherd. Surely His goodness will follow